What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at the Pagemaster starring Macaulay Culkin and Christopher Lloyd. Let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. The story of Pagemaster is this. Macaulay Culkin stars as Richard Tyler, who is this very neurotic kid who is pretty much afraid of everything. One day, he gets trapped in a library in the middle of a storm, and in so doing he slips his head, he gets a concussion, and then he finds himself as an animated figure, and he has to work his way back into the real world while at the same time overcoming his fears. So that's the overall idea of the Pagemaster. It's kind of a mix of The Wizard of Oz and Last Action Hero. Like when you watch Pagemaster, you can see that there's a lot of Wizard of Oz-y influence with it. And I don't know, to me, if you watch this movie and Last Action Hero back to back, it has a very similar story structure about a real person going into a fantasy type of world. In the case of this movie, it's a real person going into the fantasy world of books, and that's this movie's concept. But taking all that into account, I like Pagemaster. 20-something years later, I still get a lot of enjoyment out of this movie. This is just a very good-natured, good-hearted fantasy movie. This is not Macaulay Culkin nor Christopher Lloyd's best performance or best movie at all in their catalog of movies. But for what this movie is and what it has to offer, I enjoy it. The Pagemaster never outwears its welcome. It's a very short movie, going only 67 minutes. It's got, fun performances from Macaulay Culkin. It's got a fun performance by Macaulay Culkin. Christopher Lloyd as the librarian, he's pretty cool, though he come across as a little bit of creepy. And he also voices the Pagemaster, who's like the ruler of the book domain. So yeah, like his performance is fine. But the real stars of this movie are Whoopi Goldberg, Patrick Stewart, and Frank Welker, who voice the characters of fantasy, adventure, and horror, who are the three book genres that Richard Tyler befriends as he journeys his way back to the real world. And the chemistry with the four characters is really what makes it work, because a real bond and a real friendship forms between them. And not only that, each of the books have their own personalities. Like Whoopi Goldberg, she's the fantasy character. She's the fantasy, so she has a more lighthearted personality. The adventure personality has just this swashbuckling piratey type of personality to him, and the horror is like this timid scared book. So like every single book has their own unique personality, and they all match that of the personality of Richard Tyler in a way. Like horror is what Richard is, like someone who's scared and timid. But over the course of the movie, he grows to be like fantasy. He grows to be like the adventure, and with the experiences that he goes through when he's in his animated form. Like we see him go against Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He goes against Moby Dick and Captain Ahab and Long John Silver and a fire-breathing dragon. And these events are what shape Richard Tyler to breaking out of his shell and not being so timid all the time. And I like it. I think the movie handled it very, very well, I should say. And Macaulay Culkin, good performance. I mean, some areas could be a little stilted in a lot of areas. Let's not kid ourselves. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed Whoopi Goldberg, Frank Welker, and Patrick Stewart, especially Patrick Stewart as their book counterparts. Patrick Stewart as Adventure is absolutely hysterical. He puts on this over-exaggerated pirate type of voice, and it's absolutely funny. And Frank Welker as Horror does a really good job of playing horror as like this bumbling type of goof in a way. And I enjoyed all that. I also enjoyed the vocal performances of the actors who played Long John Silver, in Captain Ahab, and you have Leonard Nimoy playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is pretty cool. And I enjoyed all those segments. Though my biggest gripe is that these segments, they could have lasted a little bit longer. Like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde could have lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer and had more of a scarier build-up. The stuff with Captain Ahab could have been stretched out a little bit longer. I think the stuff with Long John Silver is a perfect length, and the stuff and the entire third act with the fire-breathing dragons a perfect length. But I think that Jekyll, like Dr. Jekyll and Captain Ahab, those two could have stretched on for maybe 2 or 3 more minutes just to build upon it just a little bit more. That's just me personally. And I also think that Christopher Lloyd could have gotten a little bit more screen time as well. other things of this movie that I did that I have that I think could have been expanded upon more is the real world stuff. The real world, we see Richard and how his how particularly his father views him as being like a timid child, and his father tries his whatever he can to try and get Richard to break out of his shell, but he can't do it. I enjoyed all that stuff. I think I wish Ed Begley would have gotten a little bit more screen time. I also think that horror, fantasy, and adventure should have had more human counterparts, like the Wizard of Oz. I think Whoopi Goldberg should have made a cameo as maybe a teacher of Richard Tyler. Patrick Stewart could have played like Richard Tyler's grandfather, and Frank Welker could have been like an uncle. And the personnel and those real life personalities could have had a reflection as to what they would become in the book realm. I think that could have been, that could have been a pretty cool thing to see. It would have been very, very Wizard of Oz, which is what this movie is. It has a very heavy Wizard of Oz influence, but I think it would have added a little bit more to Richard Tyler's character just in general. And it would have been cool just to see Whoopi Goldberg, Patrick Stewart, and Frank Welker just have like human counterparts, as opposed to just being in the animated realm. Speaking of which, in the era that this movie was made in, the animation is really not that bad. It looks pretty decent. In some areas it looks really good. In other areas, not so much. This does really have that dated CGI look to it, especially when the mural on the library starts to melt down and absorb Richie into his animated counterpart. Like, that stuff can look a little bit dated. But the actual animation and the full-blown and that half of the movie, I thought was actually well done, and it looks pretty cool. And to me, it still holds up. Yeah, I don't really have that much else to say about the Pagemaster. At the end of the day, I enjoyed this movie. I think it has a very good message about overcoming your fears, and we see that happen with Richard Tyler throughout the course of the entire movie. The performances are a lot of fun. Like, the story is derivative of movies like The Wizard of Oz, and to me is derivative of Last Action Hero, but it puts a little bit of spin on it by putting it in a library book section, book atmosphere, and for what it is, it works. So yeah, at the end of the day, The Pagemaster for me is going to get a solid 6 out of 10. I enjoyed this movie. It ain't the strongest movie in the filmography of Macaulay Culkin or Christopher Lloyd, but it's still very much enjoyable, and a lot of people still remember it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on The Pagemaster. Let me know yours in the comments sections down below. Like this video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.